once you fall in love, things change.
It actually kind of happened by chance.
I asked for adventure and they gave it to me.
Kind of a long, gradual, slow process.
It wasn't one of my goals, but, whatever happened, happened. And it happened.
Maybe a bit of a surprise that we're still in Japan at this point.
Hello and welcome to JQNA Season 2, Episode 2, The Plan. I'm your host, Catherine. Moving to Japan is what I like to consider an end game goal. It's one of those items that ends up at the bottom of a list that you can only check off once you've accomplished most, if not all, of the other items that came before it. For some people, the act of finally moving to Japan means that they can take a breath. For others, it means that it's time to start thinking about the next set of goals. Or in other words, it's time to start planning for the future. These plans are often not set in stone. I'd say that it's more like they're scribbled on a chalkboard, ready to be altered or scrapped completely at any moment. I know this well because in the 10 years that my husband and I have been living in Japan, we've spent quite a lot of time altering and adjusting our plan. What seems like a good idea today might not be a good idea a year from now. That's part of life. Adjustments need to be made. However, the situation that is my husband and I is quite different from the situation that is most people coming to Japan. We were already married before coming to Japan. We had known each other for years before getting married, and for the most part, our values were pretty much in line with one another. Although there are others out there who are in similar situations, some of whom you'll hear from in this podcast, I was curious as to whether or not marriage and children was something that people plan on, or if it was something that happened by chance. So without further delay, let's get on with the show.
So I originally came to Japan to teach. Education was my goal. I've always wanted to be a teacher, and I've always really wanted to work with foreign students. So coming to Japan and getting married and having children was not at the front of my mind. But, once you fall in love, things change, and they can change really fast. But it just happened by chance. It really happened by chance. I was just really focused on working and hanging out with friends, and then I met my husband, and everything changed from then.
I was married before I came to Japan. We had no intentions of having any kids while living here in Japan. Actually, the original plan was for us to only stay for maybe a year or two. So in a way, it actually kind of happened by chance that we had a kid while living here. But we had discussed it, and we thought it would be a good thing.
I never had marriage or children in mind when I came to Japan. Again, I came here and I got here when I was 22 years old. 21 years old was when I arrived. So it was the opportunity and the offering by the military that brought me here. I'd always had a fascination with the East, really, the Far East in particular. Traveling in general and wanting to get out and see as much of the world as I could had always been something that I yearned for. I grew up my entire life in my hometown back in St. Louis, Missouri, and I never left St. Louis, Missouri except 2 times. Once I went on a vacation to Florida, and the other time I went on a vacation to Chicago. That was it for 18 years. So I really, really wanted to discover more about the world and more about what was out there. Prior to coming to Japan, I was in the military, and this was in the 90s. I had been around the Caribbean, I had been in some places in Europe, and of course the Middle East. But those were visits, some of them extended visits, and to this day I have been and spent significant amounts of time in 24 countries other than my home country. So I was pretty grateful for that. That was an opportunity that I asked for adventure and they gave it to me. Got exactly what I was looking for. So no, I wasn't coming here with the idea of getting married or having children. That just sort of happened. But it's been happening, I guess, for a long time now. We've beat the odds, and we worked really hard at it. And I'd say that so far, after 18 years of marriage, 19 years together, we seem to be doing okay.
In short, no. I wasn't expecting marriage or children in Japan anyway. My original contract was to be here in Japan for about a year, and then I would return home. But since the contract was only 1 year, I decided I wanted to stay in Japan for another year just to try things out on my own, live in a different city. I was also seeing someone at home, but in the end, of course, it was a long-distance relationship, and that didn't work out so well. So even after that, I had no plans. I was only like 22 or 23 at the time, so didn't have any plans of getting married, and especially to a Japanese salaryman who was chained to his desk 24/7. So yeah, I was just having a good time, enjoying the single life, and came across a English conversation school here where I am now. And my boss, who was a woman, ran the English conversation school, and she also ran a little pub with her brother. And my now husband was one of the customers at that bar. And he was also taking English lessons in his free time. So that's kind of how we met, and I guess we were friends, or in the same group. We would go skiing together. We even went to the States a couple times on the school trip. So we've known each other for about 8 or 9 years, I think, before even getting serious. So it was kind of a long, gradual, slow process to getting hooked up with a Japanese guy. And he's also not a regular company worker, so in all, that makes things pretty good.
I did not have getting married and having kids in Japan in mind when I came. I just came to experience Japan. It wasn't one of my goals, but whatever happened, and it happened.
Getting married in Japan was by no means a by chance thing. It was something that I absolutely intended to do. I didn't come to Japan saying, I'm going to come to Japan and marry someone. I came to Japan already engaged to a Japanese person. So I met my now wife in South Korea. We were both living and working in South Korea when we met. I was working as a teacher. She was working as a Japanese language teacher, and we met and fell in love and all of that stuff. And we got engaged. We then moved to Canada and came to Japan after that with the full intention of getting married since we were engaged. We did, of course, talk about having children. We discussed having children. But one interesting thing enough, I'm not sure if we really plan on having children in Japan per se, because initially when I first came to Japan, we only planned on staying here for a couple of years and then moving back to Canada. But one thing leads to another, and almost 8 years later, we're still here in Japan. We've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So having children was definitely something that we both wanted to do. I've always wanted to be a father. I grew up with a wonderful father and mother and a great childhood memories, great parents, and I wanted to be a parent as well, and my wife wanted to be a parent too. So it was no surprise that we got married. It was in the cards, and not a surprise that we had children. Maybe a bit of a surprise that we're still in Japan at this point.
Is moving to or visiting Japan part of your plan? What about having children or getting married while in a foreign country? Let us know by leaving a comment over on Facebook at facebook.com/JQNA. Also, be sure to check out the show notes over on kittydoesjapan.com/JQNA. There you'll find information and thoughts that may not have been included in this week's episode. Love JQNA? Tell the world about it by leaving us a review on iTunes. It not only helps show your support for the show, it also helps others learn about the show. In next week's episode, we're talking about what special considerations our guests took when deciding to get married. It's going to be an interesting episode, and I hope you'll join us. On behalf of myself and the cast, I want to thank you for listening to this week's episode, and we hope to see you next time.